this evening's very special presentation. Our presenter tonight has come from a long way away, and I see there's a lot of people in the audience here tonight who may have come a fair distance yourself to join us tonight. Meg Anderson is going to introduce tonight's presenter and also the other people that are here to help in just a minute. I'm Chris Beach. This is the 10th week of this winter's Lapping Lecture Series. We still have 4 more presentations to go after this evening's presentation, and you're all invited to come back if you'd like to with that. But I'll fully understand if you're here for just this one event tonight, because this evening is definitely very special. And to introduce it, here's Meg Anderson.
Y'all see me over the podium? Hi, and welcome to tonight's presentation. It is most important in life to have a passion. Passion drives curiosity and exploration, allowing mankind to understand and later pass on information, skills, and traditions to future generations. For Jamie Pastika, myself, and many others, this passion has turned into a sense of urgency and responsibility regarding the study, care, and conservation of reptiles and amphibians. As a young child, I remember my fascination with tree frogs, garter snakes, and the painted turtles I found in my backyard. And although we grew up at different times in different places, Jamie recalls the same memory. Last summer, I had the privilege of working alongside the executive director of the Reptile and Amphibian Discovery Zoo. Of all of his credentials, the most impressive thing about Jamie is his wealth of knowledge about the geography, physiology, and natural history of reptile and amphibian species, and his willingness to share that knowledge with anyone that would care to listen. Working as an animal educator and keeper gave me a chance to see just how effective live animal presentations can be on fostering a love for nature in young and old alike. Jamie is a great example of how, as environmental stewards, we can use our passions to affect the global outlook and positive change. Assisting Jamie tonight in his presentation are reptiles provided by Clayton Kern, Tirza Nichols, Mark Mullen, Woody Rose, the president of the Herpetological Society, Rick Sisko, Tegu Guy, and the vice president of the Herpetological Society, Bob Dubois. I'd love if you would join me in welcoming Jamie Pastika.
Hi there. First off, I wanted to thank Unity College for sponsoring me to come out tonight. I'm very excited to get a chance to speak with you a little bit about some of our animals and about what we do with our zoo. This is my first time in Maine, and it's been a great experience so far. I've had a chance to kind of get out in the wild here, see a little bit of Acadia, and kind of get outside and trek around a bit, but I'm just very excited about this. Excuse me. And tonight I'd like to talk to you a little bit more about my passion for zookeeping. For almost 15 years now, I've worked as a zookeeper, starting out at Santa Fe Teaching Zoo, where I began a program in Associate of Science studying these animals in a zoo that they actually have right there on the school campus. We worked through the zoo learning about these animals through academic courses, and also each day we would spend time working our lab taking care of these animals. So it's kind of my intro into the zoo field, kind of learned a little bit about the basics of zookeeping, about the responsibilities involved in caring for these animals, and just the incredible potential to spread knowledge about these animals and just the wonderful things they do. Excuse me just a second. After Santa Fe Teaching Zoo, I went on to Friends University in Wichita, Kansas, and there I earned my bachelor's degree while interning at the Sedgwick County Zoo. And this was a great asset to me because it gave me a chance to intern in every single department of the zoo. We worked mammals, birds, hoofstock, just all kinds of different things. My favorite being the reptiles and amphibians. That's kind of where my passion really lies with these animals. And during this time, I also had a chance to work as the night keeper. It gave me a chance to travel around the zoo, working with animals like grizzly bears, wolves, elephants, lions. I've learned to ship these animals, feed them, care for them. Got a chance to learn a little bit about assisting veterinary staff. And this kind of led to a little more time there in the herp department. I actually, upon graduation, was found a position in the herp department there, working with an excellent collection. They had animals as diverse as Komodo dragons, several different venomous snakes like vipers, rattlesnakes, cobras, and small animals like poison frogs as well. So I got an opportunity to spread to gain quite a bit of knowledge about the diversity of these animals. And during this time, I decided that I really wanted to open my own reptile zoo. And along those, I'm sorry, just a bit nervous here. Public speaking is a big part of my role, but it's something that's always been a challenge for me. But anyway, after a little time there at the Sedgwick County Zoo, I moved on to the Jacksonville Zoo, and this was a point in my career where I really had a chance to learn a great deal from Greg LaPera. He's one of the most nationally renowned individuals on the care of crocodilians. We had several different species there. We had American alligators, Nile crocodiles, and some different African species. And we had a chance to kind of learn from his experience. I actually helped write the crocodilian management textbook that's used by the American Zoo and Aquarium Association today. He and I co-authored the transportation chapter, and we kind of learned from his example kind of some of those zookeeping techniques. Here I am helping to wrangle one of our 12-foot alligators. If any of you have watched Crocodile Hunter, being a zookeeper is not always a safe thing. Every now and again you just got to jump in there and get a little bit dirty. What we would do is we would go ahead and get a rope on these animals, pull them up out of the wetlands area, and my job generally is to stop the animal from rolling. I would jump on the animal's back, kind of help hold them down. Buddies of mine would get some duct tape on there, and from there we would actually tie the animals to a ladder. We found that this was the most efficient way to transport these animals. They can weigh about 500 or 600 pounds at a piece there, so we found that about 10 or 12 of us could get on the ladder, haul them down to the veterinarian, and really get a good look at them. Every now and again, when you've got large animals like that, they get a little bit of an interspecies aggression going, and we would have to go ahead and take them down there to get patched up. Here's a shot working with one of the warm and fuzzy animals, this little pronghorn antelope. This was back at the Sedgwick County Zoo. Following my time at Jacksonville, I decided that before we went on to Minnesota to open up our reptile zoo, what I should do is work with one of the corporations. Disney's Animal Kingdom is one of the better renowned institutions in the country for their animal training and for the guest experience. Working for a corporation was kind of a different experience for me. Generally, if you think most of the zoos, they're kind of a city or county-run organization, but Disney's Animal Kingdom, with the corporate background there, was kind of a different experience. I started there as a night keeper, much like I had at Sedgwick County Zoo, kind of training, working with some of those different animals in the evenings, helping with medications and that type of thing. And my focus area was poison dart frogs. At Disney, as I mentioned, training was something that was expected in each area. You train some variety of animal or others. With us having poison frogs, this was something that I thought, we're going to train frogs? I mean, that's not quite what you'd expect. I've got colleagues working rhinos, working elephants, lions, gorillas, but they said we need to train frogs. So I'm like, well, all right, if we're going to train frogs, let's run with it. And what we did is they expressed a desire that we'd like to shift these animals into a jar where we can get a closer look at them. And I thought, well, all right, if we're going to try and do this, let's kind of go all out with it. So I looked at how the other individuals were doing their rhinos, doing elephants, kind of weighing these animals, shifting them through where you get a proper look at them. So I went ahead and designed shift boxes, little plexiglass boxes where we would actually shift these animals into this little box. They would, through audible cues, much like you would just with an elephant, you clicker training or you give a whistle or a different type of vocal cue for that, for those animals to shift and do the desired behavior. So we would get these animals to move into these stalls, actually use a medical scale that would weigh them down to 1,000th of a gram, and we would kind of track these animals' weights just like you would with a larger animal. We actually had a little part on National Geographic Channel with Brady Barr with some of our frog training. I got a little bit of flack from colleagues in the field. I mean, my background is working with those crocodilians, Komodo dragons, some little feistier animals. But having to go to a conference, hey, today I'm going to be talking about my training of frogs, is always a little challenging. You catch a little bit of stuff from that. But I'm comfortable enough in what I've done in the field that I was able to go ahead with that. After a couple years at Disney, my wife and I found that we were kind of in a position to go ahead and try to go ahead and create our dream of the reptile zoo. And along those lines, we moved up to Owatonna, Minnesota. And our first step in this process was to open up a traveling educational program aspect of the zoo. And what we do are we bring about a dozen animals. Typically, we bring a few different amphibians, frog, toad, and salamander. We bring a crocodilian, like this is one of our dwarf caimans. We bring a turtle, or 3 varieties of turtles or tortoises. We'll bring an alligator snapping turtle like this. This is a yellow-footed tortoise. And we'll also bring a few lizards. Here's one of our veiled chameleons. And then a few varieties of snakes. This is our Beatrice, our Burmese python. And what we do with those animals is we take them out to schools, libraries, birthday parties, and we talk about the important features of these animals, some of their natural characteristics, some of the cool things they do. And then we also like to share a little bit about conservation. I'll talk to you a little bit more about our conservation message towards the end of this. But we found that just getting up close and personal with these animals is such a rewarding experience for the kids that they do kind of have a feeling for those animals and an affinity. And from there, just that desire to conserve those animals and protect them. Here my wife Melissa is. We bring our animals kind of a rolling cart, travel it into the buildings, and we'll typically do a presentation where we'll talk about those animals, followed by a chance for the kids to come on up and get a closer look and touch a couple of those animals as well. Here's one of our boa constrictors. You can just see the looks on the kids' faces. They're just so enamored by those. Here's our Burmese python. This is our mid-sized animal. We've also got a 13-footer, but that one typically doesn't go out quite as often. It's a little bit more of a handful to haul. We try to make our programs interactive. We found that involving the kids in these programs is just a big way to really make it a memorable experience. And this is something that I did learn at Disney, kind of that special guest experience where they get a chance to feed other animals, and everyone in our programs gets to touch some of the animals at the end. One of the newest features that we add is discovering the Zookeeper experience. And what we do with this is a little bit more of an advanced class. Some schools are into kind of a more lasting impression. And what we do for the kids is a 6-day experience where we do a day of amphibians, a day of reptiles, a day of different crocodilians, a day of snakes, kind of like that. And what we do is we teach them about what it is and what it entails to be a zookeeper with these animals. We bring in some of those live animals, and then we talk about, well, how would we care for these animals? How would we properly manage them? And we give them a chance to kind of set up a little tank. Towards the end of the program, we actually bring a couple animals back. They get picked from those animals, and we let them go in there and set up a tank and talk about how we would care for them. We let them feed a couple of those animals, just try to make it a fun thing for them. Here we are on graduation day with one of our alligators. All right, at this time I'd like to go ahead and introduce you to a few different reptiles and amphibians. Tonight we're going to focus on lizards and snakes. And again, I'd like to thank those students that were able to provide us with animals tonight, and the Maine Herpetological Society as well. This first lizard that we have today is called a black and white tegu. And these are one of the largest species of lizards native to South and Central America. This animal can get almost 5 feet in length. It's a little wiggly right now, being a little shy. You can see as it comes out there, you can see that giant tongue. That is called, that forked tongue is there to pick up chemicals in the air. And when it comes out there, chemicals attached to that, they pull it back into their mouth past their vomeronasal organ. And that allows them to find out where the food is, if there are predators around there. The reason for the forked tongue is they can actually use that for direction finding to tell a little bit telepathy right which way that scent is coming from. These are an animal that are found in kind of a drier portion of South America. You find these down in Argentina, Chile, and Paraguay. And they are one of the few lizards that actually makes a nest. These animals dig burrows down into the ground, potentially 4 or 5 feet under the ground, and they'll actually gather plant matter like a bird might, or crocodilians. They'll gather that stuff and then kind of line the nest. And one of these animals in some literature has been known to lay up to 65 eggs. So very prolific animals. These are what we would call oviparous lizards, or egg-laying animals. And other lizards and snakes, on the other hand, are viviparous or live-bearing, both different styles of reproduction. These animals, when they're young, when they hatch out of the egg, they're about 9 inches long. Very wiggly today. Let's try and get that up there. They're an animal that have kind of a green coloration when they hatch out of the egg, due to a little bit more of an arboreal lifestyle with some of those animals. And as they get older, some of these animals will change, they'll transition to this black and white color as they're spending time on the terrestrial or ground-dwelling existence. That seems to help them blend into the shadows a little bit more and help them to hide from potential predators. At this size, not much to worry about. But when they're a little bit younger, that is potentially something that a lot of them could be picked off by birds of prey or other predators. And what I'm going to do here, I know some of these animals are a little bit smaller and some of you are a little further back there. So what we're going to do is some of the members of the Herpetological Society are going to go ahead and take these around and let you have a closer look. Towards the end of the presentation, we're going to give you a chance to actually come up and touch a couple of these animals. And this cute little guy here is a bearded dragon. These animals are native to Australia. And they get the name bearded dragon because if these lizards feel threatened, they kind of puff out their throat like a little beard. They kind of open the mouth and try to look as feisty as they possibly can. And what they'll do is that, even though they're not an animal, that a bite from one of these would probably be almost harmless. By looking as offensive as possible and trying to look as just a little feistier, these animals will cause other animals to think twice about trying to feed on them. And that gives them a chance to make a run for it down a burrow, climb up a tree, or to escape from those other animals. This little lizard does not, like that tegu had that tongue for smelling. This guy actually has a sticky little tongue for capturing food. And we'll see if this one's hungry this evening. If this were a chameleon, its tongue would be able to shoot out to about this length to catch food. Being a little bit smaller here, these guys have a tongue that's about 1 inch or 2 in length. And we'll see how shy it's going to be here. We'll just kind of wiggle that around a little bit. We'll see. This one, not being a presentation animal, maybe a little more shy, a little more hesitant to eat here tonight. We'll give it a shot. That's one thing with working with animals. You can never tell what behavior you're going to get. We'll try a little grape, see if this looks a little tastier. Maybe we're getting a little interest. During our presentations, typically we'd let one of the kids come up, but since we don't have any here tonight, maybe a few big kids, but yeah, unfortunately I don't think we're going to get the desired behavior right now. But this is a young adult animal. They can get up to maybe 6 inches longer than a really large bearded dragon, but they're found in kind of more arid regions of Australia. If you look on the side here, they've got some big rough-looking spikes there. Actually very soft to the touch. On these side ones, but by looking like a little bit tougher to eat, a lot of animals are going to leave you alone. And these guys are, as I mentioned, omnivores. They'll also eat on a lot of crickets and small insects, chase down whatever kind of prey items they might find. The last lizard that we have to share with you tonight is called a blue-tongued skink. And this is an animal also native to Australia. And you can see where that name comes from. It's kind of flicking it out there to show you right now. Skinks are an animal that we do have right here in the United States. They're typically quite a bit smaller, maybe about the size of this one's tail here in our country. But one of the most common lizards found throughout the world. These guys are found throughout rainforest areas, montane forests, and even more arid regions of Australia. And that blue tongue is there to help it as a defensive mechanism. A lot of times in nature, those bright warning colors, like that bright red of a coral snake or the yellow of a bee, those warning colors like that kind of tend to tell predators that this animal is potentially poisonous to eat or venomous, and that'll cause other animals to think twice about trying to feed on one of these animals. If you look along the sides, you can see very reduced legs there. Evolutionarily, these are similar to some of the legless lizards. Some skinks have legs that are reduced to almost nothing, even maybe lacking some limbs on there. But interesting little guy. This guy might reach a length of just over 2 feet in length. And these, in contrast to the tegu and the bearded dragon, are live-bearing or viviparous animals. These animals do have development of their young within an egg, but it's a soft-shelled egg that upon, these guys actually give essentially live birth. Those little soft-shelled eggs pass out, and the babies kind of come wriggling out of the eggs after a little period of time. Does anyone have any questions about lizards? Anything you'd like to know? There are several thousand species of lizards around the world. They're one of the most, they are the most common type of reptile. They range in size from mojito geckos, which are only a little over an inch in length, up to the size of the Komodo dragons, which can be over 10 feet in length and over close to 370 pounds. So a lot of variety there. We find them in every continent except for Antarctica. Anything? Any other questions? Yes?
Are Komodo dragons close to, like, I know crocodilians are close to dinosaurs, close to them, or what are the next closest?
Actually, to the dinosaurs, dinosaurs are, in relation to reptiles, are kind of split into two groups. The archosaurs, which are the bird-hipped dinosaurs, which are animals like the crocodilians today, and then the birds. Those are actually some of the birds with newer taxonomy. They're more closely related to the reptiles than they are actually to their own grouping. So those crocodilians and the birds are the descended from the archosaur group of the dinosaurs. And then the lizard-hipped or lepidosaur dinosaurs evolved into our current lizards like the Komodo dragon. So that's kind of where that relationship comes from. Yes, sir?
How are lizards in general with swimming?
Some lizards, not so much. Others are excellent swimmers. There are animals like water monitors that swim every bit as well as a crocodilian would. I've seen these animals in Australia kind of coming up trying to get a closer photo of one. They'll hurl themselves out of the tree straight down into the lake, swim to the bottom, and hold their breath for probably upwards of half an hour or longer.
Wow.
So some of these are remarkable swimmers. Others, like little horned lizards from more arid regions, probably not so much. Any other questions?
I do.
Yes?
I got a very general question about conservation. Like,
Yes.
what are important aspects of conservation for the lizards and what's being done about it? Now.
Lizards are not as well as threatened as some of the other species, reptiles and amphibians out there. Certain areas, some of the insular island species face a little bit more threat with that, where they're smaller populations. But lizards in general seem to do better than some of those other animals. On the other hand, amphibians are animals that are critically endangered in a lot of parts of the world. 1/3 of all amphibian species are threatened with extinction today. And in the last 20 years, more than 100 different species of frogs and toads have gone extinct around the world. And I'll talk a little bit more about that with our conservation message in a few minutes here.
Thank you.
Anything else? The next group of animals I'd like to talk about are the snakes. And there are close to 2,000 different varieties of snakes around the world. Snakes range in size from about 5 or 6 inches with a blind snake, all the way up to 33 feet in length with the reticulated python. Those are the longest fingered snakes. I mean, that's close from me to that exit sign in length. There's some pretty amazing reptiles out there. Snakes like this one, this particular animal is a ball python. This is a little bit more of a primitive snake. And some pythons, like I mentioned, 33 feet in length. This is one of the smaller pythons. This animal is going to top out at somewhere between 4 and 5 feet in length, probably. The girls are a little bit larger than the males, just like some of those other reptiles and amphibians. The females are quite a bit larger because they carry the young. The larger the female, the more offspring she might produce. And this animal is found in Central Africa, sometimes in the more open areas, kind of grasslands merging on the edge of the forest or open forest woodland areas. You can see, just like the tegu lizard, flicking that tongue out, curious what's going on around it. And this is an animal. Who knows what snakes feed on here? What kind of diet? In the back there, Clover.
Yeah, mice and rats.
Mice and rats. That's the main thing that, especially as herpetologists, that's what we're going to feed our animals. We get a shipment of mice shipped on dry ice a couple times a year in the mail for our animals. But all snakes are carnivorous animals. They feed on other animals or their eggs. There are some varieties of snakes that will feed on, like our garter snakes here, that might feed on frogs or salamanders or fish. Others eat earthworms. Some of the larger species of snakes, like those anacondas and pythons, have actually been known to eat deer, antelope, monkeys, maybe even small crocodilians, or even potentially people. So pretty varied diet. Luckily, there aren't too many of those around. But in some of those rainforest places, that's something that you might have to consider. Not often, though. This animal right here would probably eat a lot of gerbils and mice in the wild.
And it is an animal that's an ambush hunter. It might sit, if you look at that pattern there, very cryptic coloration, might sit there beside a trail waiting for another animal to come by. And they would feed mostly on those roads. I'll talk a little bit more on feeding strategies with our next animal here in a minute. One last thing I'll talk about with this guy, though, is this, one of the senses they have. You can see it's using that tongue to sense, use it for a sense of smell right now. These guys also have something along the mouth. And when we bring these animals for a little bit closer look, you'll see they have little pits along the top of the mouth. Those are heat-sensing pits. And they actually use those. Essentially, if you've ever seen like someone look through infrared imaging devices, kind of like if you watch on the television show Cops when they're in the helicopter watching everybody down below on the ground. The cool earth is like a blue color. The warmth of like a rodent is that bright red coloration. And that's how these animals are able to find a lot of their prey. They use that probably more so than even they would their eyesight to find these animals. That and that sense of smell combined together. This next animal is a little bit larger here. And this is a boa constrictor. These animals are found from Mexico all the way down into the southern portions of South America. And it's very similar to that ball python with one major difference. These animals are live bearers or viviparous snakes, kind of like we talked about the lizards, whereas those pythons are egg layers. This animal is an animal that we find in habitats as diverse as rainforests to a little bit more arid regions. And again, just like that ball python, these animals use that coloration as an ambush hunter. This animal right here could potentially eat something the size of a football without much trouble at all, maybe even something close to volleyball size. And if we look at the size of the head, that's kind of surprising because these guys are just able to choke down some incredibly large meals. This animal would sit beside a trail waiting for that prey animal to come by, would strike out extremely quickly, lightning speed, and then once it has a hold of that animal, it's going to throw coils around it. It is going to constrict that animal. Essentially, there used to be the belief that these animals would suffocate their prey. They would squeeze harder, the animal would breathe out, exhale a bit, squeeze down a little bit more, and over time that animal would just suffocate. Newer studies show that these animals may actually squeeze so hard that it causes the heart to stop and blood vessels to burst like a stroke. Once that animal is done for, this thing's going to swallow it in one large piece. They've got 6 rows of teeth in their mouth, 4 up top and 2 on the bottom. And those teeth are just like little hooks, like I mentioned, for grabbing onto their food. But after they get a hold of that, they'll use that to kind of bring the food down into their mouth. On the front portion of their jaw, right here in the center, their jawbone is not connected. It swings wide like a gate to the side to allow bigger meals to pass through there. And on the sides of their jaw, they've got ligaments, like rubber bands, that will allow those to stretch significantly. And once it gets past the mouth, they use those teeth to actually ratchet the food back. They'll use it to pull it into the mouth. And once it gets down there, the muscles in the throat will pull that prey on down. These are different from us in their ribs on the bottom as well. If you think about our sternum, we've got our rib bones connected. On the bottom, these animals' ribs are kind of free-floating on the bottom. They're not connected. That allows a really large meal to pass down. I've actually seen pictures of a snake about this big around that ate a kangaroo that probably weighed pretty close to what I did with an amethystine python in Australia. These guys will eat so much that they're literally stuck there for days at a time after a meal like that. Not a great survival strategy, but it's something that if you need to, if food's not around, sometimes you'll eat a little bit more than you should. I mean, you think about us at Thanksgiving, might have a little bit too much mashed potatoes and turkeys, maybe we'll nap it off a bit. But these guys just literally stuck there until they can digest a little bit of that and move out of there. Does anyone have any questions about snakes?
Ever been bitten?
I have been bitten. That's part of being a zookeeper. Most zookeepers will show you a scar or two. Even with the excellent standards of animal handling that we're able to learn over time, and enough time in your career, law of averages, some accident will happen along the way. I've never been bitten by a venomous snake. I've worked with cobras, mamas, rattlesnakes, bushmasters, a variety of those animals. And we do take quite a bit more precaution with that. With venomous snakes, as I was mentioning to some students earlier today, with the proper training, you can actually work venomous snakes probably about as safely as you can drive home on a little bit of an icy night. With proper training, I mean, you're using snake hooks to handle these animals. We try to use shift boxes to move them in from one area to the next so we don't have to have contact with the most deadly of the animals. But when you know what you're doing, it's not a terribly dangerous thing. I've been bitten for the most part by snakes like maybe a boa constrictor or a water snake. Some of these animals, I travel around the world to photograph these animals in the wild. And in the process, every now and again, if you've got a water snake slipping into the water, and you may just fish it out knowing that you may take a small bite in the process. But it's something that, again, generally not even a Band-Aid needed. I would rather be bitten by a 10-foot python than I would by a hamster, as far as bite potential. Rodents have very nasty bites. These guys, you're going to have a little pattern of tooth marks, tiny little droplets of blood, but that's about it. So not that big of a deal. Any other questions? In the back there.
Do you have venomous snakes that you do?
We do not currently have venomous snakes. We currently, our reptiles are kept in our home for the time being. We have our traveling exhibit, which I'll show you some slides in a few minutes here. And with that, those animals we do bring out of there. But having these animals in our home currently, I just would not feel comfortable having venomous snakes. You need secondary containment. You need a better area than we have them in just for safety reasons. Once we do have our permanent facility, we do intend to exhibit many different species of venomous snakes.
Fangs right now?
I think not even a hognose currently. But yeah, no pistiglyphic snakes at this time. Yes, sir.
When was the last time this snake ate?
That's an excellent question. I think we would have to ask its owner. Last weekend a guinea pig. There we go. So, and again, potentially an animal like this could go a year or more without feeding and still be healthy if it's at a healthy body weight. Being a cold-blooded or ectothermic animal, these animals are able to survive for quite a bit of time with much less food than we might need. That's how these animals are able to survive in some habitats that mammals could never get by in. These animals are able to, do not regulate their body temperature. As ectothermic animals, they're basically the temperature of the outside environment. And because of that, they regulate through the warmth of the sun or through moving maybe onto hot rocks that have been heated by the sun in the evening. And that's how they regulate their body temperature, by moving into the shade. Because of that, they're able to get by on so much less nutrients than we would need. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
If you were to have one, what kind of temperature gradient would it be used to living in?
Depends on the variety of snake. I mean, we look at the animal's natural history, and from that we devise our handling or our husbandry standards for it. For something like a boa constrictor like this, we would want to have it probably minimum of 70, probably ideally 75 to 80 degrees for the probably 75 degrees for the cooler portion of the exhibit, and then we would use either a heat pad, heat tape, or potentially a basking light, depending on the species, to warm up the other end of the cage. And that's what we call creating a thermal gradient. So those animals can regulate their own temperatures by moving from cooler to warmer, depending on what their needs are. And I mean, if they're digesting food, they might want to warm up. If they've got a belly full of babies, they might want to heat up and incubate help to develop those young. Just depends. No venomous snakes today, but I would be glad to take questions on them as well. Yes, sir.
I don't know if this is in your line because it's a little bit off reptiles, but there's fish are cold-blooded also, but a lot of them have to eat voraciously. Do you know what the reason for that is?
Unfortunately, fish are not my specialty. Any of the other vertebrates, I'd do a little bit better for you on that, but my experience with fish typically is running down to the bait shop, buying some fish for our turtles, our alligators, and that kind of thing. I've cared for them a bit, but it's just not my background, unfortunately.
Probably because they're a lot more active.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah, these are very sedentary animals. Unless reptiles are out breeding, feeding, generally they're going to find someplace underneath cover. Most of the time, a boa constrictor like this would probably spend 80% or more of its time hidden underneath in a hollow cavity in a tree or tucked into another animal's burrow, unless they're out looking for food or basking. And the basking is typically pretty sedentary as well. They're not doing a whole lot, much less so than their mammalian counterparts, or fish for that matter. In the very back there.
How much room does a boa constrictor need, like, for an exhibit?
It depends. As I mentioned, these guys are pretty inactive animals. In the wild, they would probably spend, an animal like this might spend most of its time in an area probably the size of a 10-gallon aquarium. But ideally, we do want to give them more room to be able to stretch out. I would recommend something, ideally for these guys, maybe 6 foot to 8 feet long, 3 foot high by 3 foot deep maybe, for a snake of this size. And again, it depends on that. If it's an animal that you're taking out regularly so it can stretch out and move around a little bit, you're able to get by with a little bit less room than that.
Catch pneumonia quite easily.
Potentially. If these guys are some of our cooler winters, these guys can face respiratory challenges. Yes?
You were talking about how it senses what it wants to eat by the heat. And that makes me nervous because I'm heading to the AT pretty soon. And I'm really worried about rattlesnakes. So they just sit there on the side of a trail and they sense your body heat. Would they attack me?
Highly unlikely. Those animals, they see our thermal image and we're huge. If you think about a snake's a few inches off the ground there. And they're not looking at us as lunch. Maybe a 20 or 30 foot constrictor potentially, but even that, probably not for the most part. Those animals, snakes bite for 2 reasons. They bite when they're hungry or when they're scared. A rattlesnake might bite if you went to step on it, or accidentally stepped on it, or got too close, didn't realize it was there. That's the nice thing about rattlesnakes, at least they'll let you know when you're getting close for the most part. Not always, but I mean generally they're gonna, if they're aware that you're there, they're going to try and rattle. They're given an opportunity. The first thing these animals want to do is get out of our way and just escape. It's if you accidentally step on one, lean on one up against something, that you have to worry about that. The last thing they want to do is bite us. Snakes really do a lot of good out there as well. I mean, these animals feed on rodents. Just one pair of mice can lead to over 1 million offspring within a period of 2 years between them having babies and their babies having babies, if there are predators like snakes and hawks and owls feeding on them, and if there's enough food. I mean, some studies have actually shown that a single snake in some parts of the world can save a farmer $500 in crops. So these guys do a lot of good stuff out there. Not what you need to be afraid to be out there worrying about. And where are you traveling to?
The Appalachian Trail.
Appalachian Trail.
Yeah.
Okay, so there are timber rattlesnakes and copperheads in that area.
Right.
But again, I go out looking for these animals, and I consider myself pretty good at spotting them. And again, I'll be lucky if I see a venomous snake in a day, or even in a week for that matter, in a lot of these areas. I mean, you travel out west road cruising, you spot more rattlesnakes, but for the most part, in certain areas there are very dense populations here and there, but for the most part, it's very rare that you're going to see a venomous snake, unless you're maybe traveling out at night. Maybe a little more likely then, but still not that common. Any other questions? All right, well, what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and send this animal around. And I've got a little bit more of a presentation for you. I've got a couple more slides on our zoo, and then I've got a little bit of a presentation on a trip I took to Peru, to one of the zoos down there. Before I do that, though, I do want to talk about one other thing, and we mentioned conservation message a few minutes ago. We talked a little bit about how we try to encourage the preservation of these species through their importance. We talked about how these animals help to control the rodents, and they help to control the insects with those frogs and with those salamanders and lizards. But one other area that these animals really benefit us in the future is potentially through new medicines. Scientists are studying a lot of these animals and finding that these have physical features that may actually help a lot of us in the not too distant future. In the southwestern part of our country, there's a lizard called the Gila monster, which is one of the two species of venom. Actually, they split it into 5 species of venomous lizards in the world. And this lizard's venom is actually in use in some of the new diabetes drugs. So the venom of this animal is actually helping people all over the world. And also crocodilians, scientists study some of these crocodilians. They find that these animals can get some horrible injuries fighting amongst each other. Just big open wounds that amongst people, the infection would set in so quickly. But they found that these animals can actually, something in their blood actually kills a lot of or destroys a lot of this infection. They'll go ahead and, their blood is capable of just killing that. They've been able to take 1 drop of crocodilian blood, drop it into a tray full of bacteria, and it just kills all of it. So scientists are trying to make new medicine new antibiotics from the blood of the crocodilians. Some of the poison frogs, little brightly colored poison frogs from the Central and South American rainforest, have a toxin in their skin that actually is used by some of the native peoples in hunting on some varieties of those, but use it to kill their prey. But that poison that's in the skin, some new studies show that it may be 100 times as potent as morphine as a painkiller. So that's really, really a remarkable thing that could potentially benefit us all. There's a frog called a puddle frog. There's something in their eggs
that helps their eggs from growing mold or fungus, which on the wet surface of a frog egg would be something that you would think would happen. But that same substance, they found that with burn victims, that substance inhibits the growth of mold and burns on those victims. And it also helps to keep the tissue damp so it would heal better by not drying out in the process. There are many more examples of how they're studying these animals. Medical companies spending millions of dollars in studying the venom of some of the different venomous snakes in the fight against cancer, heart disease, stroke. So these guys may benefit us immensely in the not too distant future, but unfortunately we are losing so many of these animals that it's a very scary thing. As I mentioned, more than 100 different species of frogs in the last 20 years alone. And that's, I mean, not only are these wonderful animals, and it's a shame to lose anything like that, just for their beauty in the wild, but they may benefit us all, even if it's for a selfish reason like that. These animals are well worth keeping around. We talk to the kids about how they might benefit these animals, how they could help them in that process. We talk about the need for recycling. We talk about the need for energy conservation as one of the easiest things that they might do. We talk about how that directly correlates to air pollution unless we're using clean power like wind or sun power or solar power. So when they're able to shut off those lights, they're potentially stopping to help global climate change in the process if enough of them act together in that fashion. So a conservation message is a very important thing about what we do. Not only do we give the kids a chance to get hands-on with these animals, which really creates that love of those animals with a lot of them, but we also do talk about how these animals will benefit us all. All right, and we are starting to run a little close on time. I'm just going to show you a couple more slides here. This is a shot of this is our tent for our traveling zoo. Here are a few of our exhibits in there. We exhibit typically about 50 different species. This traveling exhibit is kind of our transition towards having a full-time reptile zoo. We exhibit everything from, there's a yellow anaconda on the left there. We've got alligators, caimans, a lot of different things in here. Basilisks, a variety of different frogs. And this is something that we're in the process of building more and more exhibits, bringing more animals in. And we are hoping to buy 15 acres of land and potentially later this year and go ahead and transition to having a permanent building. My goal is within the next 10 years to have one of the better reptile collections in the country. Savannah monitor on the right and a Nile crocodile on the left, separated by glass, otherwise we'd have an incident. One other aspect of herpetology, other than captive care of these animals, is studying them in the field. And this is something that is near and dear to me. I mean, there's almost nothing I like better than getting out into the rainforest and looking for these animals to do photos and just to see them in their natural behaviors. I was hoping to maybe come across something up here, but with a low layer of ice and snow, unfortunately, just not conducive this time of year. This is the Rio Amazonas, and this is in the northern part of Peru, near the city of Iquitos. This is one of the headwaters of the Amazon. While I was working at the Jacksonville Zoo back in 1999, I was fortunate enough to travel down there with a couple of co-workers. In the center there are John Thompson and Andrew Payne. John being his specialty being reptiles as well as rhinos, and Andrew specializing in the elephants. But we all got together and traveled down to this zoo, in the Quistocoche Zoo down there in Iquitos, with the ultimate plan of bringing them some supplies, medical supplies that they were unable to come by on their own, and also some keeper husbandry tools, and just to lend them a little bit of advice in their husbandry, in their animal care. And beside us, next to me is the director of the zoo, and on the far left is the curator. This is the city of Iquitos. Peru is a country where more than half of the people live in poverty. Unfortunately, there are 27 million or so citizens, and this is one of the smaller cities, just a few 100,000. This is the home where we were able to stay for a couple of days at the end of our trip before we flew back to Florida. There you can see the view from the front porch there. Unpaved streets, sewage very limited, but people were very gracious while we were there. Little market along the river. This is the souvenir stand, actually built on stilts there. The water flows right up underneath this thing during the wet season. Made me a bit nervous walking up in there, but they all seemed comfortable with it, so we gave it a shot. Here are a few of the homes on pontoons down along the edge of the river. And this being the dry season, I mean, the water levels are greatly reduced. During the wet season, that would just be, all of that would be underwater. This is kind of a black market area in animal trade. Unfortunately, we don't have any shots of the things that they were selling, but they would sell potentially endangered species, a lot of different animal artifacts there. The people just struggling to get by, they'll make do, unfortunately, just with some of those animal products that we would hope not to see. This is the Quistacoche Zoo. This is where we spend our time. The zoo is built on the edge of a large lake there. On the right-hand side, that's the museum right here. And that is where we spent most of our time. We would actually camp out within the museum there. They let us stay right there on the zoo grounds. Little beach there, that's kind of a view of the rest of the lake. And they actually had fairly well-designed buildings in some aspects. This is their aviary, very effective. This is their primate house, which for those of you in the zoo field, I mean, primates with them, it's always a concern with disease and anything like that. And these exhibits are side by side, animals able to reach from one exhibit to the next. So just for sanitation reasons, kind of a scary situation for keeping these animals healthy. This is their herpetarium/aquarium. They've got a variety of different fish and reptiles in there. Reptile collection is a little more limited. I think they had 2 zookeepers within the zoo that were not deathly afraid of snakes. So it made that a little bit more challenging. This animal up on the rim there is a spider monkey. That's a black spider monkey. And this animal had been hit by a car and they rehabbed it at the zoo. A lot of these animals are actually rehabbed animals there. Here my buddy is just kind of hanging out with it. And if you look at that frog's tail, you may notice it's got a frog there. Dark side of this poor spider monkey's tail is its addiction to hallucinogenic drugs. The frog would carry, or excuse me, the spider monkey would carry around frogs or toads and would just lick them for the high. So, see, that's after a rough afternoon there. This guy, just one of those things. What do you say to that? I mean, on a brighter note, this is the zoo is built on the side of a hill, and it's spring-fed. They don't have a sewage system like we would expect in most modern facilities. It's set up like a Roman aqueduct. The water flows from the springs. They divert it through a series of channels, and they'll actually just use sandbags to block a channel here or there to increase the flow to other areas. And this is how they use this to clean their exhibits, fill pools. Very challenging system. Here we are going out to lunch with some of the staff. They decided that we should try some of the tasty grubs from their region. When they brought them to us originally, we had a bowl full of big 4-inch long wriggling grubs, which none of us were going to try. But a few cervezas later and a little bit of encouragement from the locals and a little bit of cooking, we decided that we'd go ahead and give this one a try. Still a whole lot of grub, but my buddy Andrew was giving it a shot. I essentially almost swallowed mine whole, but this is the curator there, and I don't think he's ever eaten a grub as well. Wanted to encourage us, the gringos, to give him a try, but he, on the other hand, I think did it just because of the fact that we had done it at this point. He was obligated. Kicking back at the end of a long day at the zoo. Hanging out with some of the kids there. This is their museum. There are animal artifacts on this area. And we would set up our tents directly within underneath that structure, which worked well and good for the first couple days. The third day we were there, we woke up to muffled voices, opened the tent door, and there were 100 children gathered around our tents there on school day, just kind of hanging out right there. So we just kind of closed the door and waited until they left, but not quite what we expected. My buddy John that is the skull from a black caiman. They actually grow a little bit larger than our American alligators. Most of the caimans are quite a bit smaller, but they may get up to close to 20 feet in length. Here I am trying to get John up there so he can get a photo. This is a necropsy or animal autopsy, and this woolly monkey had died as what they explained as monkey AIDS. And they're out there doing a little bit of dissection on trying to figure out what the exact problem was. And we thought it was interesting to watch at first, and we weren't that concerned until a day or so later when they're preparing the animals' diets on the same table where they had just done the necropsy. So again, just not a great understanding of the potential for spreading disease. This is actually a wormer. There's some kind of like a cornbread biscuit with some worming medication in there. Asked if we wanted to try it, and again, Grubs will give it a shot, but after the monkey AIDS incident, we were just not going to risk that much. Here are one of the wildcats. The exhibits here, by today's standards here in the United States, we would find these conditions almost unacceptable. Animals just living on concrete without enrichment. Here are a pair of the jaguars. Some of these animals, you have to understand, have been raised since they were young animals. They were animals that had been captured for the black market wildlife trade, or just had been injured animals that they've rehabbed there. A pair of jaguars that, one thing that you might notice here is that in South America, the safety standards are not the same as it is here. You don't have lawsuits if someone's injured, so people just learn that you don't walk too close to exhibits. These animals could actually reach out almost to the children's toes as they came in the area. And the fencing there is just held on by a couple of U-nails. If these animals were not fat and happy, I think they would easily push out the bottom of that fence. Here's one of the cutest little guys I've ever seen. And unfortunately, this was his home. We talked to them about behavioral enrichment, and they allowed us to go ahead and bring in some logs, palm fronds, just create some behavioral stimulation for this animal. He was terrified by the new surroundings for about an hour, and after that he was just all over the place, running, bouncing, tearing through everything. Not an experience you generally get. Even though the conditions were, the animals were pretty well enclosed in these small enclosures and without the natural things that we might think about that might be necessary, these animals still reproduce pretty regularly, and they were able to use them for some wildlife conservation programs. Three-toed sloth. Caiman lizard. This guy was almost 5 feet long. Just really a remarkable animal. I'm sorry, that's my prejudice. Someone it's the baby jaguar. For me, it's the caiman lizard. This is just kind of a shot of the zoo. That exhibit on the lower left is where the caiman lizard lived. Almost to the point these guys could climb over the wall, but being native animals, I think they just found one around the area, potentially brought them back if they lost one. These are an animal you rarely see in zoos, and these are giant Amazon river otters, also called lobos del rio, or river wolves. These animals could actually stand up with me. I'm not being that tall. Put your paws on your shoulder and lick you in the face if they had the desire. Just immense animals. I mean, twice the size of North American river otters. And here's one of the cubs. Very cute. Or a pup. I'm not sure cub or pup terminology on that. They had a few caimans there, and the caimans were something that were thrown food to, but not generally worked by the staff there. They were all nervous around caiman. They had a couple small animals like this and about a 5-foot larger animal. And while we were there, we went ahead and caught all of those animals up out of there for them, showed them how to handle them a little bit better, and sexed a lot of those animals. You sex a caiman by probing them. And Peruvian national TV was by this afternoon and was very excited about the fact that we were going to probe a caiman. But so we did a little bit of time on there. This is a quadamundi or quadi, and these are an animal similar to a raccoon. They're in the same grouping, the Procyon. About the same in size, but these range from Arizona all the way down into the Amazon rainforest. And there was a little group of these that came through the zoo trying to scavenge scraps or any leftover food. One night I came back from hiking. During the evenings, my buddies would generally go out with me, but one evening they were a little bit tired after a long day, and I just went out by myself. I came back to find these two gentlemen standing with them by our campsite there. And my buddies promptly explained to me that these guys were poachers. I'm like, poachers? Neither of my friends spoke much Spanish. My Spanish is iffy, but I was able to speak a little bit more. After a few minutes conversing with these gentlemen, we found out that they were the the zoo guards to stop poaching. So we were much relieved at that point. These guys actually took us around the zoo during the evenings. They were very excited about the idea of going out to look for animals, so they would point out anything that they might come across. Group photo from the capybara exhibit. Very feisty boa constrictor in the front row there. They sat there and lunged at us for most of the photo. This is the only venomous snake we found during the trip. This is a fer-de-lance, and this is an animal that It was killed instantly as soon as they found that they just have a cultural fear of snakes by most of the individuals down there. And as soon as something that's definitely recognized as venomous is seen, it's just done for. This is a little nature trail. This is where I would spend most of my evening out there trying to find different species of reptiles and amphibians. This is a common milk frog. These animals receive that name because, like a slimy salamander that are found close to this region, these guys have a skin secretion that if another animal threatens them, they ooze this out of their skin, and it can actually poison or potentially glue that animal's mouth shut. That's a pretty toxic substance. Here you can see after handling that frog, I'm trying to scrub it off my hands using sand, and just very challenging. This is a smoky jungle frog. This is one of the largest species of frog in the Amazon rainforest. And you can just see, it's about the size of one of our bullfrogs. It's a little different from our frogs here in that this is a terrestrial frog. If you look at most of the frogs here in Maine, all of those water-dwelling frogs have those webbing, but have that webbing between the toes for swimming. These guys roam around the rainforest floor eating any animal smaller than they are. They might feed on small snakes, lizards, rodents, anything they might catch. Found a little tarantula along the way. These are interesting. Where I had stayed before I met up with my buddies, I went about a week earlier to kind of check things out. I had a little extra time off. We had some of these living in our room along with bats and mice. Go to sleep and you can hear bats fluttering around the bed, mice scurrying across the floor, and just watch a tarantula make its way across your roof beams. Luckily, I was tired enough at that point I didn't care after spending enough time in the rainforest, but for some it might be a little unnerving. This is a little turnip-tailed gecko. These are actually one of the largest geckos in South America. This individual is about 6 inches long, 7 inches long. Very cool eyes on these guys. And they've got, as most of the geckos, these guys have special skin flanges on their feet that when they push them down, it's like a suction cup. They could run right up the wall, even across the ceiling. This is an arboreal species of salamander from the Amazon region. These guys are similar to like our tree frogs with the sticky toes where they are able to climb up through there or climb up along our windows or up onto the trees. These guys have big flat palms that they would use for suction. Little 6-tubercled Amazon river turtle. This guy's about 6 inches long, found it along one of the ponds. This is one of the most beautiful snakes I've ever seen. This is a red vine snake, and during the daytime, that bright red coloration, this thing would be hidden underneath concealment, so you'd never see that. For the most part, but at night that red color really doesn't matter because everything is dark, nothing's going to see that. But if it's unearthed during the daytime, something comes across it and disturbs it, that bright red color may warn other animals just to leave it alone by looking like the deadly coral snake. This is the rocket tree frog. This is the animal that the spider monkey was partaking of. One of the most beautiful frogs of the trip as well. This is a reticulated poison frog. And these animals, some of them can have incredibly toxic skin secretions. This particular variety, not as toxic, but the terrible poison frog from the Columbia region actually has a poison in their skin 250 times as toxic as strychnine. Potentially enough poison in one frog to kill 9 people. I'm not sure exactly how they figure that, but that's the estimate given. This is a clown tree frog. These actually came in a few different morphs. That one's not terribly pretty. This one much brighter, more colorful. And the most unusual variety that we saw is this giraffe-looking morph. Kind of a cool little animal. We just got a little bit of rain, so these amphibians are just going wild there. This is a little anole lizard, like similar to some that we might have in the southern United States. This is a little common polka dot frog. If you look at that red stripe along there, this entire dorsum or backside of this animal is that bright red color when we found it. And over time, by morning when we went to photograph it, it had returned this green color, just like a lot of the gray tree frogs that you might find. They switched from that gray to green color with the skin chromatophores. Another little gecko, little plica lizard. Don't have a common name. This is one of the little water snakes we found along the edge of the trail. This one's interesting in that these animals are both able to lay eggs or to give birth to live young, depending on seasonality and what might best advantage the survival of the young. Little leaf litter frog. Another another poison dart frogs. And that is it. Does anyone have any other questions?
I
Time for a question or two.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, were there any antelopes in your area?
Not that I think there is one species potentially in that area, but I was not fortunate enough to come across any. Few of the Dendrobatids, Phylobatids, Epipetobades, but no antelopes. Yes?
What other places have you traveled to?
I've spent some time in Belize, Guatemala, Costa Rica, Australia, New Zealand, and then extensively throughout the United States. Just getting out there in the woods and seeing these animals in their natural habitats is one of my favorite things to do. Any other questions? Well, thank you all very much.
We really do thank Jamie Pastika coming all the way here from Minnesota in April to see us. I want to thank you all for coming out this evening. I want to make one special thank you before we do depart for the evening, and that's to Joe and Amy D'Arcangelo, who were the people who brought Jamie to us. So let's thank Joe. Very much thank the people who brought their animals here this evening for us, and to the Maine Herp Society for participating in tonight's event. And with that, say good night. Good night.
The thrill is gone. The thrill is gone away. The thrill is gone. The thrill is gone away. You know you've done me wrong, and you'll be sorry someday.